I'd like to welcome you all to our viewers and our supporters and our of National Action Network. We are here with our president and founder, Reverend Dr. Al Sharpton, as we are discussing his newly released book, Rise Up, A Country at the Crossroads. The book is now available on alsharptonbooks.com and also at premiercollectibles.com/rise up. Now, Rev, I was so excited when I was asked to have this conversation with you because I'm forever grateful for your leadership and your mentorship as I've been in since at the age of 13. And so I contribute a lot that I have grown to be to your leadership in addition to Ebony Riley and all of the National Action Network staff. As you know, being a Southern boy from Lawrenceville, Virginia, I'm always about scripture a lot, quote scripture a lot. And I'm reminded of my favorite scripture, 1 Peter 4:13, that says, "Beloved, think of not strange concerning the fiery trials which are to try you," but it tells us to rejoice. And I feel like the title of your book is so comparable to that scripture, because even though like we find ourselves in rough places, even though we find ourselves in challenges and find ourselves in obstacles, we must rise up. And so just I want you just to tell us a little bit why you chose the title Rise Up and what made you decide to write the book.
I saw that as we had, for the last half century, started making incremental steps, sometimes bigger steps, toward civil rights and voting rights and gender rights and LGBTQ rights and environmental protections and climate change protection, that we all of a sudden, with the election of Donald Trump, started going back to deregulating a lot of the changes that it made in the environment, to suspending a lot of the voting rights that has happened around the country. We started backing up on police reform and gender rights, LGBTQ rights. So I said that we're really at a crossroads in this country. Are we going to go from all the things that we saw fight when I was a kid in the 60s, watching Dr. King in the South, Adam Clayton Powell in the North, all the way to I became a teenager at 12, joining the movement in the North, all the way to Barack Obama being president? Are we going to now abort that road, abandon that road, and go through this road now that goes back to 1940s America, before I was born? And I said, I need to really write a book to challenge the country to which road are we going to go? And for those that agree with me that we need to continue the road that was started, that was in all of our interests, we need to rise up and give them examples of how to rise up, because you don't have to be a leader of a big organization or big church or big march or big organization, and give them examples of how to do it and some people that did it. I talk about people in each one of those areas that didn't start with no huge anything, but they made historic differences. And I had that in mind when I started the book. I finished the book early summer, and then events started happening. I kept delaying the book. George Floyd happened, Breonna Taylor happened. So I delayed the book almost till right before we started the march on August 28th, the big march on Washington. So it is right up to the minute, and it is something that I want everybody to read before the election so we can rise up and decide which road we're going to take this country down.
I think the book is the timing is so great. And as you said, we want to remind our viewers that this is a live signing. And so you can click the link in the description to get your signed copy right now while we have Rev here and ask your questions. We have a question that came from JT from New Jersey. She said, how did you, Reverend, how did you find the strength to keep getting up every time that you were knocked down?
Well, I think I'm signing while I talk, but I think that it comes from my spiritual life. I started as a boy preacher when I was 4. By the time I was 11 or 12, I kept wanting to go to rallies. I kept wanting to be engaged in the movements I saw on television. My father left when I was 10. And I think what happened was we had a nice home in Queens, New York, which at that time was considered suburban almost. And then when my father left and my mother had to take care of my sister and I by ourselves, we moved into the heart of the hood in Brooklyn. And I had never lived there and in the hood. And I started asking kids my age, why is there so much garbage in the street? When are they picking up the garbage? They said, oh, they pick it up on the weekends. Well, I lived in a black middle class neighborhood that they picked it up every day. I lived one where you call the cops, they would come and people weren't afraid of the cops. And they were usually at that time black cops, one or two. Uh, you go to the hospital, emergency room, you didn't have to sit all night. So I began to understand the difference in zip codes, even among blacks. And I think that's what fired me up into watching Adam Clayton Powell on the news and Martin Luther King down south. And my mother, who was a fundamentalist Pentecostal, Church of God in Christ, where I was a boy preacher, was concerned that I kept wanting to go to these rallies. She was concerned I'd leave the church. Because in those days, church didn't have nothing to do with all of that. Mm-hmm. She brought me to my pastor, Bishop F.D. Washington. And I write about Bishop Washington's background in the book. Because ironically, even though he was a Pentecostal bishop in the Board of Bishops Church of God in Christ, he was named after Frederick Douglass. And he was one of the few Kojic bishops that was involved in the civil rights movement in the North. So he said, don't worry about it. I know what to do. And he brought me and my mother to Reverend William Jones, who was the head of Dr. King's organization in New York, SCLC Operation Breadbasket, New York chapter. Reverend Jones said, I know the boy preacher, maybe he can get some of those youth in the churches to come. We have a youth division. And he introduced me to the national head of Breadbasket, Reverend Jesse Jackson. And they mentored me. And as I got into my teens, Bishop Washington wanted me to stay in Kojic and become a pastor, one of Kojic's churches, and eventually a bishop. Reverend Jones wanted me to go to seminary and pastor a big church. I just felt like, no, I want to, my feeling, and I'm firm that my calling was to do social justice. I wanted to build a civil rights group, and my pastorate would be the community everywhere to fight for justice for everyone. I felt if I had pastored a church, you'd have to be there. You'd have to preach the funerals and do the weddings and all. And you wouldn't be free to travel and be there where you needed to be. And you wouldn't have a structure that could handle the issues. So I did what Dr. King, as you know, pastored in Montgomery when he did the Montgomery boycott. He left that church to go co-pastor his father's church in Atlanta so he could be free to do things because his father was the central pastor. Jesse Jackson never pastored the church, so I went that route. And that's how I remained committed. So as I made that commitment and submitted and committed to my calling, there's something about having the faith and the calling that you lose all fear. So even though I got knocked down, I wasn't afraid because I'd get back up. The question of for answering your calling and finding success is not how many times you get knocked down, it's how many times you get back up. And I challenge people to don't worry about getting knocked down. Life is going to be full of knockdowns. You just have something in you that'll make you bounce back. And that's usually what you believe inside.
That is so true. And I feel like, you know, this whole being a part of this is a calling itself. And so that is spot on. And so someone else, Reba out of Indiana, she asked the question, and I think I also sometimes ask myself this, as you know, you can do all this work and time again, you just get knocked down by what you see. When we think about the Breonna Taylor case, it's very hard, you know, we got, you know, the charges, but it wasn't it wasn't what we expected. We expected it because time and time again we get the same thing over and over again. And Reba asks, how do you keep your anger in check and still stay civil with your eyes on the prize?
Well, I think that one of the reasons that we are able to do it in National Action Network is because when you look at the fact that we represent not only a cause, but we represent some of the victims. And we owe it to them to fight to get justice in their case, but then overall to get laws changed so that everyone can be protected under the law. So I may want to do a lot of stuff that would be reacting to the egregious and downright beastly things they do. But is that going to help that family in court? Is that going to help us get the laws changed? So am I there to vent my anger, or am I there to channel my anger to really solve what I'm angry about? For example, I was totally beside myself with outrage when I went to Minneapolis the first time to lead the vigil around George Floyd with Eric Garner's mother. In our first trip here, we went back to do the funeral. And I thought about it. If we get these police indicted, we had everybody was marching, people all over the world marching. If I act up, as some people infiltrated and did, and we get the police charged, they're going to use our acting up and say, you see, they were burning all that. That's why the cops reacted to George Floyd, because that's the element we're dealing with. What wins the case is if they say, how could you do that? This is not the behavior of the community. So as angry as I was, I knew that I had to contain myself and ask others to contain myself, because having me burn down a building was not going to get those cops indicted, and having me burn down a block was not going to get them convicted. So what do I sit up and tell the family? We burn down the block, everybody know we're angry, but ain't no happening. Nobody going to pay for what they did. I didn't think that's fair. If they asked me to come in, did I do that to them?
Sure. We have another question coming from Pennsylvania. And the question was, what was your favorite part about writing this book?
I think my favorite part was at the end challenging people to understand that in my journey, I've had the honor of preaching a lot of funerals, and everybody's life ends at some point. When you're young, you think that you're invincible, but people die young and old. And my challenge at the end of the book is to say at the end of it all, what statement do you want your life to have made? That you went to a happy hour, that you partied on the weekend, that you had nice clothes, maybe get a nice car. Well, that ain't much of a statement. And I think that was the favorite part of my book, is after addressing all the issues from race to policing to climate change, to LGBTQ rights, to gender equality, and giving examples and giving a map of, as I see, ways you can be involved, was to say, now, you choose your route. You choose how you're gonna rise up. But know that you're making a statement about your life. That's why it doesn't bother me when people say, I did a virtual bookstore last night with Alicia Garza, one of the co-founders of Black Lives Matter. Her and I were talking about how we work together intergenerational. She has her style, they have their style, I do mine. And I don't get upset or concerned when people do things a different way than me, because I'm not working for them. I'm working to say, this is what Al Sharpton is about. And you got to say that about yourself. This is your statement. Because when I was born alone, and when they lay me in the ground or cremate me, whatever decision is made, I'm going out alone. I want to leave a statement that in the 21st century, when we were at the crossroads, I was part of those that tried to guide us the right road. They will not care what kind of car I drove, what kind of clothes I wore. They will not care if I had a TV show. You could care less right now, Talik, who had a TV show 30 years ago. They won't care about me 30 years when I had a TV show. They will care when this country was going through things and there was time to stand up, that some people stood up, and I want to be in that number.
You know, that is so spot on. I oftentimes say this fight that we're in, we're not fighting just for ourselves. We're not just fighting for our brothers and our sisters and our moms and dads and uncles, but this fight that we're in, we're fighting for generations yet unborn. And then when our children's children are looking in the history books, will they be able to say that we stood on the right side of history? Will they be able to say that we rose up in the face of adversity and opposition? So I think that's amazing. I want to continue to remind our viewers that this is a live signing, that you can be sure to click the link in the description to purchase your signed copy today. We're so excited to have Reverend Sharpton here with us to discuss his book, his inspiration behind writing his book, and just some inspiration for you, some jewels to you, that you yourself can rise up when you face adversity and opposition. We have another question coming here from Mary in California. How can we as believers be instruments of unity in today's world and thrive in the face of division and hate? So how can we as believers thrive?
I think the first issue is vision. Where are we going? What is the objectives? Like when we had the big march, August 28th, we said we want to see the Senate deal with the George Floyd Policing and Justice Act. And we want the John Lewis Voting Rights Act, 2 pieces of legislation. That's the vision, that's the purpose. Then you build unity around who's united around that. I think sometimes we try to have unity without defining united to do what? Because nebulous unity never is going to stick because there's nothing holding everybody together. You have to first say, as believers, this is what we specifically want to get done. Now let's see who will unite around it. Some won't, but God makes a way, in my belief, that you'll always have enough to get something done. Most people didn't march with Dr. King. Biggest march they had in Dr. King's time was 250,000 at August 28, 63. We just commemorated. They had 250,000. Most marches, Dr. King didn't have 10,000 people. They never had, and that march was only 250,000. We had a million-man march in 95. We never had a million-man march before that, but we changed the country, we changed laws. So I think sometimes people put too much in just having all of us be together rather than all of us together for what? You can take a few. She said, believer, if you read the Bible, Gideon had a big army. God said, you have too many. Take them down to the waters, and those that lap water like a dog, take them with you. Because everybody with a big crowd don't mean they have people that are ready to go into churches and get the work done. And I think in the generation behind me, all of you that are coming up, in a social media age, you have more likes and followers on your social media than you have troops that are going to streets and into the suites and get things done. So you generate sometimes whether or not you're popular on social media, not realizing that there may be just as many haters following you. There may be just as many people that's just curious. And there are many people that like you really follow you, but they're not going to do the work. You want people that's going to do the work. And that's the ones that, as Gideon had to deal with, that lap water like a dog. Those are the ones. What does it mean, lap water like a dog? That means you don't care how it looks. You don't care about having false pride. You'll get down like a dog. That's the army. And that's the people that's ready to go through and change this country. Those are the ones that's going to rise up.
That goes right into our next question. The question was, what can the average person do to help with the restoration of this country?
I think the average person has to start right in their circle, their family, their friends, their hangout buddies, their barbershop buddies, their bingo buddies. You registered to vote. What are we going to do about the senator in our state? What are we going to do about this? When does the city council meet? This town hall. Start right where you are and then build. When I got started as a boy preacher, and when I was 13, they made me youth director of Bread Basket.
I started with 4 or 5 kids that was in church with me. We formed the youth division. We started marching on where Jesse and them was boycott. It built up to 20. It built up to a couple of hundred because other youth department with churches. People join things that they can see going somewhere and that serves a purpose. But if you're waiting to start with hundreds, you'll never get started. Start with 2 or 3. And let me tell you something. When I got started, it's funny. I was saying this to a reporter this morning. There's no way when I was 13 years old that people say, "Oh, he's just doing that because he can go have a TV show one day or a radio show one day or going out to the White House with Obama." When I got started, there was no MSNBC. There was no cable TV. There was no black radio. We didn't dream there'd be a black president. This wasn't a career move. This was a commitment to a calling. And that's why I believe firmly in that saying, the scripture, seek ye first the kingdom of heaven and his righteousness.
And his righteousness.
All these other things will be added to it. God will give you more than you thought about because there are things that he can make available that you can't even imagine going to be happening. I could not imagine that I'd live to see a black president elected and then reelected. But God put me where I could have access to him. I could have known that at 13. I could have known that at 23. Just do the work, and the work will make room for you.
That's right. That's right. And so as we find ourselves, rising up, and we're talking about, this time that when we're in the middle of, getting prepared for November. We got a question coming from Louisiana. The question is, what should we be doing between now and Election Day?
We should be getting everybody we know, starting with our family, best friends, to vote. Then everybody on your block, then everybody in the next 3 blocks, getting them to vote. If it's early voting, get them to do that now. If it's not organized, so you can get them to go to the polls that day. If you got to drive 3 or 4 times, get 2 or 3 friends, say, Ken, we're going to take Election Day and just take our cars and drive back and forth. Start right where you are. Don't look to make an I have a dream speech. Say, I'm going right in my little square, going to do my part and get organized now to do it. Don't wait. We're only 32 days away. Don't wait till 3 days before. Get to going now.
That's right. And we want to encourage those who are watching to sign up for National Action Network's Voter Brigade so we can help protect the vote in your community. You can go right to our website and click on Voter Brigade. You can sign up to do what you can to help protect the vote in your community. So we also want to continue to remind folks that you can click the link in the description to get your signed copy of Reverend Al Sharpton's book, Rise Up. And now one of our young people out of California had bought your book. He has your first book, and he also has your latest book. He asked the question that he wanted me to ask you: from writing your first book, what difference do you see between your first book and your book that you just wrote recently?
Well, the first difference is the first book, he's talking about Go and Tell Pharaoh.
Yep.
That was written in 96. The whole world changed between 96 and 2020. First book was written last century. And I was, 24 years younger. And Obama hadn't happened. I hadn't run for president. I had not done a lot of the things internationally. So my perspective is different. The landscape is different. But the commitment and the calling is the same. A lot of the optics are different. I'm probably 120 pounds lighter than I was in 96. But the commitment is the same. At the end of the day, with all that I have in trappings, I'm still that little boy preacher from Washington Temple in Brooklyn, New York.
That's right. And that was one of our youth leaders from Los Angeles, Tylen Davis. So thank you so much for that question, Tylen. We have a question that just wants to know, in the midst of this pandemic, how have you and your family been rising up, even in the midst of the craziness that we have seen from the White House through COVID-19, elections and voting being attacked? How have you held up during this time?
Been very cautious. wear the face mask, practice social distancing, and try to limit where I go to where I know people that are there. I think that we've got to follow whatever regulations health experts give, and but at the same time, try to be active. I use social media a lot. I do radio every day. I'm on my syndicated show 5 days a week, and I do my rallies on Saturdays and broadcast live. And Sunday I do a Sunday morning show. So I'm on radio every day, and television. My show Saturday and Sunday, but I also guest a lot of shows during the week. So I was able to keep people informed and organized even though we were locked down. In fact, the ratings went up because people were locked down and more people were watching TV and listening to radio because they couldn't go anywhere.
We have another question here. It says, who is a thought leader and inspiration to Reverend Al Sharpton? So who is somebody who inspires you today, that just pushes you, that encourages you, that, you know, that you can point out and say, you know, this is a thought leader of this generation or of this time that I admire?
I love several. I think Dr. Michael Eric Dyson is brilliant. I think that his writings and his perceptions are brilliant. And Kimberly is brilliant. I just wrote the Time Magazine tribute to him. Kendall, I think he's brilliant. I think that there are theologians that are no longer with us that I read all the time. Howard Thurman, Sam Proctor. There's getting ready to be a reprint of my pastor, Reverend William Jones, book, God in the Ghetto. Everybody ought to get ready to read that. So those thinkers are the ones that I still read a lot. I get up every morning and work out, as you know, Charlie, before dawn, and then I spend an hour going through all the newses and going through the internet because I have to be on top of everything because I want to do radio and TV. But then I spend another hour reading, and it's mostly on philosophy, theology, though, because I want to have the right thoughts and then fit it into the context of the news that I watch. You got to think long range and bring great thoughts down into a contemporary situation rather than just respond to the contemporary situation with no context for why you responded.
So right, we also have a question here from Linda from Maine. You know, being a boy preacher and growing up and being in this movement, what did you ultimately choose? Why did you choose that ladder from being a preacher and also moving into civil rights? Then do you think that the church could be more active in this movement, or do you think
I chose
what is the role of the church?
I chose it because I felt that was my calling. I felt it chose me. And I don't see them one or the other. Some people ask me, how did I choose between preaching and being politically involved? I feel being a preacher makes you politically involved. Read the Bible. Moses led a liberation struggle of the slaves. That's what Exodus is. That's the second book in the Bible. You go all through the Bible. And Joseph had to deal with the head of state when he was thrown in the pit by his brothers and he was made governor. That's political. David became king of Israel. That's political. Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego had to fight Nebuchadnezzar. That's political. So I didn't choose one or the other. What I don't understand is how people read the Bible and then say, I'm not going to be involved in fighting the heads of state that are wrong. Then what Bible are you reading?
Right. Very true. Very true. You heard it here first. We have a moral. I feel we have a moral obligation, as you know, as John Lewis would say, to speak up, and I feel like that's being a part of it. That's definitely being a part of it. As we are getting to wrap up, and we understand that we are almost less than 7 hours away until your big day tomorrow, and so we want to wish you here first a happy birthday. And if you could say anything that this last year has taught you, what would you say that this last year, as you are going into another birthday, what would you say this last year has taught you?
I think that this last year has taught me that we still have a long way to go. When I see George Floyd, Breonna Taylor, Ahmaud Arbery, Rashid Brooks all happen within a couple of months of each other in a pandemic, it tells me that we have a long way to go. But when I saw people marching all over the world, many of them not organized by any groups, when I saw people come tens of thousands in a pandemic and met us in Washington that hot day in August, it tells me that we also have a big opportunity that we've seen in my lifetime. To be able to put almost as many people in Washington as they did 57 years before in a pandemic when people were afraid to come outside, and not one iota of violence, not one arrest, and COVID-19 didn't go up because we made everybody wear masks and social distance, shows me that the struggle has to continue, but the struggle's expanded and people just rise up. So I am as encouraged as I am challenged. And that in the last year. As I entered this year, I never thought I'd see the continuity of pain like I outlined from George Floyd on. But as I stood there on that corner that he was choked, I never thought the movement would grow the way it did. I never thought Washington would happen. I never thought that I'd see people still hundreds of days later, still out there marching. So that's what I learned, that for every pitfall, there's a mountain if you just rise up and climb. Too many of us want to be dropped on the mountaintop or driven up to the mountaintop. You got to climb the mountaintop. And I see a lot of people willing to climb.
That's it. Well, you heard it here first. Reverend Al Sharpton, his book, Rise Up. You can get it today, right now. It is available everywhere, but you can click it right here in the description link to get your copy, your signed copy. Sir, we want to thank you so much. I thank you so much for all that you do. I really appreciate you.
Proud of you, Tyleek McMillan.
Thank you so much, and I'll see you tomorrow. Happy birthday.
All right.
No justice, no peace.
Yes, sir. Peace.